I'm happy to talk about my vocation because this is my 15th anniversary. It's hard to believe. I think of myself a little bit still as a rookie, but it's 15 years have come and gone since my ordination. Ordination Day is an amazing moment. Most young men are looking forward, anticipating that moment for years, and then it's there. But it's not an end in itself. It's something that propels you to the future because now you're a priest. So for me, the ordination day, when I think about it, like where it all struck home was, this reality that you're initially with your family, the first part of the Mass, you're sitting with your family as a deacon, and then you're ordained and you're led to the sanctuary. So it's kind of very symbolic and visual presentation of this change in your life. So a lot of great and wonderful memories from ordination day, which was kind of the end of one period of my life, but then the beginning of a new. We were 10 that year for the Diocese of Brooklyn, but because I had been studying in Rome, they didn't hold up the others until I returned a little bit later because our academic year doesn't line up exactly. I was ordained a deacon at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. So at the beginning of my 4th year in October, we were ordained in Rome I was ordained by Cardinal O'Brien. And so our classmates who were from all over the country, our families traveled to Rome. So just an absolutely amazing experience for everyone involved. And then the following June, I came back to the diocese and I was ordained at St. James Cathedral. So the others were ordained earlier in June and I was ordained on June 30th in 2007 by myself. It's funny, when I look back, I really didn't think I would be a priest. I had kind of this nagging idea, and my thought pattern was, I'm going to go, I'm going to find out it's not for me, and I'm going to go home. And I'm not going to be 40 and say, should I have given that a shot? So I'm 40 now. I entered 20 years ago, and I think I found my place. I was still 25. I would have been 26 a month after my ordination. So by a lot of, I think even today you say someone's getting married at 25, say, oh, it's kind of young by New York current standards. But I think similar to a young parent, it's a challenge, getting married young and having children young, but then they're grateful, I think, as the years go by that they were given that opportunity and they could eventually, hopefully, God willing, be young grandparents as well. So yes, youth brings its own gifts, so I'm very grateful that God called me when He did, and then I was ordained at that time. I think first of all I have to say I grew up in a home that was very priest positive. Both of my parents had uncles who were priests. So I have the chalice. The chalice I use every day at Mass was my grandmother's brother, Father Thomas Sheridan. He was ordained at St. James, June 6, 1935. And so the chalice that he received from his parents has been in my family since then, and I use that chalice every day. So I grew up with hearing stories about priesthood and who priests were and the impact they had. So I think just beginning there, and also my grandfather, interesting enough, was an accountant for parishes. So that put him in contact with a lot of priests and different parishes. So I became kind of aware of them through my grandfather as well. There was one priest towards the end of my high school, Father Michael Perry, who's now retired, who was the first to kind of bring me along and in a sense of kind of gently invite me to, hey, get involved with this, get involved with that. And I think that kind of set me on the road to pursuing the priestly vocation. For me, it's a little difficult to pinpoint exactly the age when I thought about a priestly vocation. I would say the initial thoughts began probably at the onset of high school, but certainly at that age not able to articulate exactly what I was feeling. But more strongly and kind of clearly towards the end of high school and then my freshman year of college. It's a great mystery, obviously, as I always say, a priestly vocation. I think ultimately it's because I saw in other priests great potential. I saw the potential to really make a difference and to have an impact. And so I felt that me living a priestly vocation would allow me to do the same. But one of the things that kind of inspired me and I saw really the power of the priesthood was by doing visits to the sick. I remember particularly in my seminary assignments in parish work, where I would accompany the priests to visit the sick. Those were always beautiful encounters of the priest entering in the midst of suffering, impending death, and really bringing hope and consolation and the sacraments of the church. So those were kind of some of the moments that really kind of excited me about the priesthood. And those are some of the things that I look forward to. So it's interesting, as Catholic as my family is, and as much as they love the priesthood, initially my parents were not very supportive of me entering seminary at that point. I was entering halfway through college, so my parents thought that I should finish college first before I entered. But I was kind of strong in my convictions, and I think once they visited seminary, they saw me in that context. From that moment forward, they were nothing but supportive. My first few years of priesthood were a bit unorthodox. My first 3 years of priesthood, I was a full-time student. So I went back to Rome following priestly ordination, and I pursued a degree in canon law. So not your typical priestly life as a young priest. And then for 1 year, I was in training for the diplomatic service of the Holy See. So a very brief experience. I was invited to do that. So I went to the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy, where I was in training, and it's a 2-year program, and then you'd be sent out as a diplomat for the church. And during that year, really didn't feel that I was in a position to do that. I had already been a priest for 3 years. I had never seen a parish. I hadn't returned home. I said, how do I not come back and serve in my diocese and move forward with this? We're accustomed to a man being ordained, and he goes right into a parish. So that was a bit delayed for me. So not being engaged in explicitly pastoral work, yes, I was celebrating Mass, I was celebrating the sacraments, but not engaged in the day-to-day life of a parish. So I was living in kind of more of an academic setting, in a communal setting with many priests. So a little bit different my first 3 years of priesthood. Ultimately when you're in seminary, you're preparing for priesthood. When you think about what you're going to be living, it's parish priesthood. So I think maybe more so than with other guys, my anticipation was that much stronger. So I felt I dove right in. The first assignment is always hopefully for guys, a very blessed time, those kind of first moments of living your priesthood in concrete terms. And then ultimately in 2010, 3 years after I was ordained, I was given a permanent parish assignment. I'm a pastor, first of all, most importantly. I'm the pastor of Our Lady of Hope in Middle Village. And then I also serve part-time here in the diocese as the Vice Chancellor. We deal with many things here that are coming from the parishes. Questions or petitions, paperwork that is being compiled at the parish level. So I think it's helpful that I know that end well so that I could respond properly here. Well, I've been Vice Chancellor twice. I was Vice Chancellor for a year, I think 2011 to 2012. And then I was appointed again, I think in 2016. So it's been another 6 years. For a good part of that period, I was kind of involved in special projects. So things would come up that needed to be attended to, and I would devote a month or 2 months and work on that special project. And I still do a bit of that. But then the day-to-day are dispensations, marriage cases, priest laicization cases, or other cases that need to be compiled by a canon lawyer for priests. So it's a responsibility and a job that exposes me to a lot of different things. So I had been rector of St. James Cathedral in downtown Brooklyn. So for almost 5 years I was in that capacity. I always say quite openly, it was a very challenging experience for me. It was a much smaller community, and just the context in which the parish was very different. It was a downtown reality, kind of a lot of coming and going. It's transitory in nature, so not what I had been accustomed to growing up and in my first assignment of priesthood, of being in a parish that was very much in a neighborhood where you shared life and you knew people and you were part of a bigger community than just your parish. So that was kind of unique about St. James, but it was a good experience for me. Because we had to try different evangelical endeavors and really stretch ourselves to try to reach people and engage people. So it was a very good experience. And as always, I met wonderful people, and I had many wonderful relationships from my time at St. James. For me, the most joy-filled and exciting is being able to enter into people's lives. I think all the time, like some of the most cherished relationships that I have now in my life that are most important to me have only been possible because I'm a priest. And because I'm a priest, people have invited me into their lives. So I go to their home for dinner,
I've buried memories of their family. I've baptized their children. I've witnessed their marriages. So for me, just to be able to share life with so many people because I'm a priest is the thing that's brought me the most joy.
Parish work is a great challenge, and ultimately what we're trying to do as priests is sow seeds. We have that parable of man went out to sow and he did so generously. And the seeds fell on all types of different ground. And that's very much, I think, an image of parish priesthood. We try many things. We try to be generous with ourselves. Sometimes people respond. A lot of times they don't. Sometimes people walk away. So it's very easy to become discouraged, I think, in parish work, to not see the fruit we desire. But I think having a little bit of spiritual maturity teaches us that that's God's part. We're supposed to be generous with ourselves. We're supposed to give the best of ourselves and leave the rest to God. So at the parish level, I've just tried to be as generous and as present as possible. I think all ministry begins with presence. That means me being in the parish and around as much as possible. Forming relationships and allowing those relationships to be moments where then we can mutually grow in faith. Really from the moment that I seriously began considering, occupation, vocation, life, I was kind of drawn right away to the priesthood. So what would I be doing? I don't know. I think I'm a people person. So I think it would be something involved with people, maybe the service industry, I'm not sure. But I've never really felt like, hey, if it wasn't this, it would be that. I've never felt that. The one job I've always, kind of romanticized about was a bartender. So maybe that's, might seem shocking, but I think it's, in some ways, you have the exchange with people, and, after 2 drinks, there's a seal of confession as well. Anything that's repeated, said you can't repeat. So maybe that would be it. Well, spare time, I like to visit with friends. I like sport. I grew up kind of what I would describe as a playground athlete, meaning I could grab a ball and play. I played all the sports every season. I got to a point in my early 30s where I wasn't really doing a lot of anything. You kind of get to that point where it's like, do you still play basketball? Do you run? And it was at that point that I was exposed more to kind of martial arts. So initially kickboxing and then eventually Thai boxing. So I know it's a bit unorthodox for a priest to be involved in something like that. I think it would be unfortunate if people reduced it merely to violence. Obviously, it is a fight sport, so that's a piece of it. But there are aspects of it that translate to every part of life, like respect, like discipline, like hard work, sacrifice, all those things which we need in every walk of life. You find when you give yourself to training. And it's been one of those places in my life that has exposed me to people that I would have never met otherwise. So it's been a surprise and a blessing.
I think it's important to find things outside of my technical work that enriches what I do. And this is one of those moments, I think, of pushing myself physically and therefore also trying to push myself spiritually. So pushing myself physically here and then allowing that to inform everything else.
And then, going out to dinner is kind of always a treat and something I enjoy. It's an opportunity to see people and to have that time together at a table. They say the first 5 years of your priesthood are critical, but it's also those first 5 years that are full with enthusiasm. But then there's a certain point where I think really the permanence, the gravity, the seriousness of the priesthood really begin to sink in, and you say, this is my life, this is it, this is forever. So I think there was that moment for me where it was like, this is it, this is who I am. And there comes consolations with that. There also comes where you have to begin to mourn certain things. You're saying, well, this will not be part of my life, but that's okay because I have this, I'm a priest.
There's a perception that priests are hatched. They don't know us and suddenly we appear in a parish and it's like we have no history. We come from nowhere. It's like we're hatched and we're placed there. Every little revelation is like eye-opening to people. Wait, you have a father, you have a mother, you have siblings. I think part of it is on just how priests are perceived by the people, that they don't always realize that we bring a lot with us. And that includes our interests, our hobbies.
Relatively speaking, yes, there's a priest shortage, but I think when we step back and realize that we still have more priests per Catholic than a lot of areas of the world, I think we're still just adjusting to the reality that we have an institutional church that was built on kind of an unprecedented number of priests. But this will be the challenge of the next maybe decade of readjusting, focusing on certain areas that can be properly supported and sustained by the priests that we have available. And hopefully by focusing in those areas, our ministries will become more fruitful.
Everyone does have a purpose. Obviously, we put a great emphasis on discernment. Unfortunately, the greater part of the church or the Christian community isn't taught enough about discernment. Those who are considering the priesthood learn a lot. That is, how to evaluate the things in our lives, how to see the moments of our lives and determine if God's speaking to us in and through them. So I'm confident if we approach life's decisions in a prayerful spirit and trying to understand what's God's will, that does become apparent. But that's not always easy for everyone to do.
Well, obviously, it's all prayer. I think we've made a mistake in the last number of years that a lot of people talk about the priesthood. I want the priesthood to be this. I think the priest should be that. I think the priest should get married. You know, and so what happened? We stopped praying. So I think the most important thing is prayer. I'm a priest, I believe, because someone prayed that I would be a priest. I know many other priests that are priests because someone prayed that they, not a person, but they would be a priest. So I think that's the most important. And then, you know, as lay people, as normal Catholics, trying to create homes and families where young people can encounter God and then come to a point where they could discover what God wants for them, whatever that might be. You know, very few will be a priest, but it doesn't mean that God doesn't call people in ways other than priesthood, you know, but trying to create homes and families where young people can really discover themselves in God.
Something we undervalue is the role of a community in a vocation. So I had a lot of people, I don't say a lot, but enough people saying, have you ever thought about the priesthood? Have you ever thought about the priesthood? So not only was I kind of internally kind of going through this process of discerning, but I heard it from other people outside as well. People were seeing something in me and then just asking the question. So it was these two realities coming together. So I think that shows how important the community is in fostering a vocation. But ultimately, we come from a community and we go back to a community. So for people to be able to ask young men the question, just pose it, you know, and then to give them the freedom and the space to answer that themselves.
I would say the same thing that was said to me, give God a chance, you know, really give the space and the time for God to speak to you, you know, go all in. You know, if you're a young person and thinking about priesthood, well, go to Mass every day. Go to Mass every day. Give it a shot. You know, take things out of your life that might be a distraction. Give it a shot.
When it comes to a life decision like becoming a priest, I think two things have to be present. One is that the idea of doing something with your life should bring you joy. With that as well, as I think it should be accompanied by some form of fear. Because when we have a sense of fear, we're understanding the seriousness of this decision. So if you're only experiencing joy, maybe you're not comprehending the fullness of the call. If it's only fear, that this idea that I would be a priest or I'm going to be married just causes fear for you, that's a clear indication that this is not what God wants for you. So for me, the two going side by side, a deep sense of joy, but also with like a holy reverence, a holy fear going together, I think help us understand the will of God. Some of my fears are, you know, centered around, am I using my time well? Am I being the best priest that I could be? So that ongoing kind of internal reflection and discussion.
If you really feel the vocation, you have to surround yourself with people that are going to support you. You know, find friends, find relationships with people that are going to help you grow, that are going to challenge you, but ultimately going to support you. You know, I sympathize with the young guys. You know, I entered seminary over 20 years ago. Things have changed radically. A lot of the challenges that young men are facing today, I didn't have to deal with. So it's even more courageous for a young person to step forward and to seriously consider a vocation. So you need that much more support. So I think finding good friends that are going to inspire you, encourage you, and support you. Technology and new media are a wonderful instrument. They're a tool, but they're one of them. I think I would also give a caution to young priests. I think these are things we have to use, but they have to be balanced. Because I think just thinking of myself and looking at other priests, there can be the temptation to think that if I'm engaging with technology, if I'm using social media, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a priest. Well, are you still visiting the sick? Are you in the school? Like, are you doing really what you're supposed to be doing? So yes, it could be a help, but it should never replace the basic priestly work. We don't want kids to have the impression like, well, for me being Catholic or me living my faith means I have to give up having fun. I have to give up, pursuing things that I love. No, like, God gave us all these things to enjoy, and so they're just another opportunity for us to live our faith, to form relationships and friendships, all those things that help us in every walk of life. John Paul II on his 50th anniversary as a priest described it as gift and mystery. And I would say, yes, it's a gift, but it's also a great mystery.